that you today finds you well and you are feeling good about what the day has to offer.
Mhm.
Thank you for tuning in to Take a Look with Quignon and Scott and Christina Cook. I am Dr. Scott, and I'm just so excited to be back. Let me tell you, it's been a mess, child. Um, but as you all know, when you are transitioning to a new school year, it takes a lot of work. And I was just burnt out. I have to own it that, Cook is the little engine that could, but I have just been burnt out. And so, but we have something great for you today. I just want to do a little disclaimer that anything that we say today has nothing to do with our own professional positions and or has anything to do with the institutions that we work for or the institutions that we received our degrees from. We are solely representing our own values and what we know as our own expertise. So again, I am Dr. Quignon Nancy Scott, and I have the pleasure of being with
Christina Cook, Washington Post Teacher of the Year.
Yay, Washington Post Teacher of the Year. Awesome. And I am so excited. Cook, I wanted you to give us a recap of what happened with your son the last time we picked up. And my doorbell's ringing, so I'll be right back.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and get this story started. So the last time you all joined us, I was sharing that my son had a negative interaction with the teacher who refused to just respond in an appropriate manner. So what ended up happening is my son ended up moving to another class. And I wasn't sure if I was okay with that decision because I felt in that moment that moving my son to another class just put a band-aid on a larger conversation and a larger situation, and that was like teacher professionalism. But my son ended up loving the new class that he's in, and I'm grateful for that. But as his mother, it's important that I bring closure to that situation with the teacher, and I handle it on a more professional level with the school system. And I definitely plan on doing just that. So I'm happy to report that John is loving his new class and he's happy, and that's what I want to see.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. I One of the things that I want to hone to the audience is that it's so important as a parent to realize your power. And so, whether or not John wanted to stay in the class
Mm-hmm.
or whether or not he wanted to leave the class, he truly had the power to make his decision. And I think a lot of times, the school believes that they are the power tool, and
Right.
so as a result, it's what the principal says. And I'm talking about from as a former principal,
Yeah.
I am talking that it's my decision. I run the school. I make the decision. But every parent has a choice,
Mm-hmm.
and your choice is either to go through the chain of command at the schoolhouse, or there's always another route.
Yeah.
In Baltimore City, it's central office. In Baltimore County, it's central office.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look about all of the other districts across the state of Maryland, there's always a central office. Even in the charter world, you have the charter board office. And
Yes.
so I think that there's always this, and every office has a complaint unit and a
Mm-hmm.
support unit that parents can use for a resource. And oftentimes parents don't want to tell because in our community, we think that like, oh, we don't want to be combative, we don't want to tell. But as a
Right.
parent, you know what's best for your child. As
Absolutely.
a parent, you have the ability to forge what your child needs and when they need it. And so it's so important to ensure that you realize the power you have and work on their behalf. So
Absolutely.
that's my 2 cents for that. I'm so proud of you because let me tell you about Cook. Cook is going to press the envelope even when you don't think it needs to be pressed. But she does it because she's passionate about her children. And more importantly, she has 2 African American boys. And this is not to discount Sydney, but Sydney's just kind of like doing her own thing. She's extremely smart. She can kind of maneuver things on her own. She has so much of her mom inside of her. But
Yes.
boys are different. And we know, we say like boys are slower learners. It's not that. It's that their development is delayed compared to girls.
Yeah.
And so parents have to advocate on behalf of their children for what their children's needs are. Remember, whether you have a student K through 16, and when I say K through 16, remember K through 12 is kindergarten through 12th grade, and then 13 through 16 is typically college or beyond. And so parents, you need to continue to advocate for your children. And I always say, as long as they're on your insurance,
That's right.
you should advocate for them.
And you know,
And there's nothing wrong with that. Go
I
ahead.
was gonna add on to your point, Scott. For me, like in advocating, I'm hoping that I can make a change for the next family that comes behind who may encounter that situation and they may not know how to handle it. So in every letter, every email, right, every conversation that I have on behalf of my kids, my prayer is that it touches a whole bunch of kids that come long after mine have gone through that particular system. So I'm advocating on behalf of all of brown and black children, young men in particular, whose families just don't know how to advocate for themselves. I am your Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, and this is the awesome part about being an advocate is that you are advocating as a parent.
Yeah.
But there are advocates in all school districts, and that's their sole job to
Mhm.
advocate on behalf of children. And typically, as educators, we only see advocates when it's a student of disability.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate that that's the case because there are a lot of students that need additional advocates, specifically in the middle ground
Yeah.
or the gifted and talented. Those are two populations in which school districts typically don't utilize their resources.
Agreed.
Oftentimes, a school will invest their resources in the bottom 20% because that bottom 20% significantly impacts test scores.
Right.
In the District of Columbia, it's PMF. You
Yeah.
know, when you think about in other states, it's like really the bottom line with testing. And then you have the top 20%, which they're naturally gifted. They don't really need much. They're like the Sydneys of the world, right? They already have it kind of going on. They're already scholars. You might have to tell them one time, but pretty much they're consistent because they want to be successful and it's already innate in them for them to be successful. So you have this going on, and then you have that middle 60, right? And the middle 60, as school leaders, we really should give that middle 60 the majority of the support because it's the middle 60 that really drives the institution. But because so much of the chaos comes from the bottom 20, we spend so much time, stress, financial resources. And when I talk about financial resources, I'm thinking about like the one-on-ones that you have to hire, the additional support you need for culture and climate, the additional school police or security you may need because of people that are, you know, impacting the community negatively, that bottom 20%. And so the 60 goes lacking and then the 20 goes lacking while you primary focus all your support on the bottom 20.
Yeah. That's real. And I hope folks caught those numbers. It reminds me of like the 80-20 rule, right? Where you know you're going to get 80% of your production from 20% of the people. And so that's where we need to focus our time and energy in the hopes that the bottom, you know, will pull themselves up to where the middle is. And that doesn't mean they don't pull themselves up without resources, but I think we also, you know, need to start narrating and speaking to the behaviors that we want to see and modeling the way so that folks that are not living the culture, who are not living up to the expectations, now have something to work toward.
Yeah, I agree. You know, we say this in church, right? Life and death is in the power of the tongue, but
Yes.
it really is amen, right? It's really in the power of everything that we do. And so when you want to speak life, meaning the positivity, the success, those things, that has to come from within, and once it comes from within, it comes out.
Yeah.
But also, if with inside of you isn't positivity, right, you are a pessimist at heart, you know, you don't see the glass as half full as an optimist would, you see the glass as half empty. As a result, that comes out of you too. And this is a great transition for us, because today we're talking about the election, because we know that in 10 more days, 10 more days, we have an opportunity to vote to ensure that we are moving forward with making sure that we put the right person in the White House. And Cook, I don't know if you watched the debates the other night. Well, let me tell you, I had a lot of issues. I just don't like Trump, right? I think that he has, it's so funny because I love The Apprentice. It was one of my favorite shows. I even auditioned for The Apprentice at one time. And it's so interesting that what he's done, he definitely is a man of power, right? That's clear.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's done with that power has truly negatively impacted our society. Yeah. And I'm thinking about that as African Americans, we have been fighting for easily 400 years with our life, you know. But this is life or death in this moment.
Yeah.
That I can't believe that in 2020, you know, they say this is the most the most important election of our lifetime, but it truly is, because I'm thinking about that the rhetoric in the streets is that if Trump doesn't lose, then there's going to be World War III. And to a certain degree, people believe it. I know people that are like close friends that are ensuring going across state lines to get weapons because they don't live in Black neighborhoods, and they are concerned that if Trump does not get in, it may be a massacre for our community.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
So here's probably where I'm torn, right? I'm torn in the sense that like faith and fear can't coexist. And I say that because I'm trusting and leaning on God to have his way.
And if Trump does not get in,
and to prevail over the land in such a way. So there's a part of me that's like looking at the news, looking at the media, that's creating this narrative of fear. And then there's a part of me that's like, my faith says that God can do all things, right? Or I can do all things through God who strengthens me. But I'm feeling like there is going to be a consequence either way. And I think the part that we can control is how we respond. And so I've never really been that person who I'm like, okay, I got to put all my trust and hope in a system, because I realize that systems are flawed because humans run systems. And so I think for me, I am hoping that America comes out, shows up in big numbers, and makes the right decision based on what they feel that their family needs and what their family values. And I feel like people, here's my take. I'm praying for the people who feel like their vote doesn't count and doesn't matter, because we are seeing through narrations on the news, we're seeing through protests, all the ways in which the powers that be are trying to stifle the vote. So for me, that speaks to how important it is. So I'm hoping folks who have been voiceless step up and vote to show that there is power in our American right to do this, if that makes any sense. So yeah. I'm trying so hard, Scott, to not get caught up in the narrative, because it can take us down a path that we probably don't want to go down.
So, but this is my thing, and I'm absolutely voting. I'm encouraging everyone to vote, but I think that we need to address the elephant in the room, which is, why do you think specifically for Black and Brown Americans that they believe that their vote does not matter?
I feel like, we're talking about a group of people who have been consistently like marginalized. And there are times when we've been more qualified or equally qualified as an other and haven't gotten the opportunity. So I think for us, it's easy to say, well, it doesn't matter because nothing changes. And for me, change begins and starts with us, right? It starts with how we are personally maneuvering our own personal finances. It's the way we think about education, regardless of what someone else is doing, right? It starts with us, how we believe our role in society is. And so I think that's why we feel like our vote doesn't matter. And to be truthful, because the Bama stole the election this last go round. And so I feel people think it's just a hoax and it doesn't matter, but it really does.
Yeah, so I agree. So the last election shows us that your vote is impactful, but your vote doesn't determine the presidency.
Mhm.
And so I think that a lot of people feel that as a result, like, why should I bother to vote? But at the true root cause of why you should vote, it's our civic duty.
Absolutely.
And so, as a citizen of the United States, which, if you were born here, it automatically entitles you to citizenship.
Mhm.
As a result, that is your responsibility to vote. And then at this point, they have a million different ways for you to vote.
Well,
You can
yeah.
vote online,
Yep.
you can do early vote, you
Yep.
can send in your ballot. And so states have made it, specifically during this pandemic, so easy and accessible for all Americans to vote. I just don't want the students that we service, right? I'm thinking about the students that we service, the parents that we service, for them to believe that their vote doesn't count, because across the country, we realize that in the larger areas where it's majority African Americans, there are thousands upon thousands of people that just don't vote.
Yeah, they don't. And I think, you and I discuss, what's worse, the uninformed voter who votes or the person who chooses not to vote at all. So I feel like some people feel like they don't want to get caught up in politics because they're not really sure where they stand on issues. And so, my question, really to you and just to the audience is, how do you manage that when you're not sure where to put your vote? When you're thinking, well, what's the lesser of two evils? Because that's been some of the, the social media dialogue as well. So I saw on Instagram yesterday, somebody said, well, I don't like either one of them. And so what do you do when you're not tied to either side?
Yeah, and I think that's a real question, because as I watch, so up until recently, I was a Obama Biden fan.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the reasons why I loved Biden, for two reasons, right? I love his wife. Remember, we saw Jill in Boston that year?
You did.
Oh, I love Jill, right? I think she is this ultimate supreme educator, and she is like white sister girl for real. Like, I love Jill. And when I think about Dr. Biden and who she is and the work she's done for public education, it makes me say, like, Joe got to be legit to be married to her, right? Yeah. But some of what's transpired over the last couple of months has really turned me off. So it's not like I'm not a fan anymore. It's just like, I don't like you either. Like, But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Not making a decision is not a choice. And I think we, if you have to pick between answer A and B, everybody wants to always pick C, or like, can I get an A.5? No, make a decision, right? A or B. If you're African American and you are rallying for Trump, because clearly there are some, I've been watching these dumb videos, and you have Black folks who are advocating for Trump like as if he was the savior for the last 4 years. And then you also have Black people who believe that Obama was former President Obama should have been the Black person's savior. And because somewhere down the line, you're not rich because of him, he didn't come and save you, you're mad. And so you now don't want to vote for for Vice President Biden. You want to vote for Trump because you feel like President Obama played you. Like, the pettiness is ridiculous. But what matters most important is that you inform yourself. And there's so many avenues
To
for
do
you
that.
to be informed, whether you are on Snapchat, whether you are on IG, whether you are just, tuning into some of the late night talk shows because you're not an advocate of the news.
Mhm.
There's no reason why a person should not be informed, because the truth of the matter is this is life or death.
Yeah, it is. And I think it makes me wonder, like I'm grappling. I'm wondering like how many folks or people in America feel like they're helpless, like that their life depends on someone else. And so for me, and you've known me for a long time now, Dr. Scott, I'm always reflective back on like what I can control. And there's so much as American citizens that we can control. And so it's like if I'm looking for someone else to make me rich, then I'm probably not going to be rich because that's not what they're looking to do for me. Right? My goals, my dreams, my aspirations are housed here, and so I'm in charge of bringing those things to the light. So I think it's really shining the light on how much America is really dependent on the government and dependent on others for their success, their happiness, and their freedom. And that is not a place I think we should be as a people. I know our ancestors certainly didn't believe in that they were depending on someone else, because if they were depending on someone else for our freedom, honey, we would still be not allowed to sit in concert halls. We would still not be allowed to integrate in the world. So I think I'm wondering, like, and I'm speaking about brown and black people at this point, like, what are we waiting for?
And I think that we're truly waiting for a leader. So when I think about like the civil rights movement,
Yeah.
and I think about the impact of the women's movement, those movements had like distinct leaders. They were leaders where everyone knew who they were. People rallied behind the leader, even if they didn't rally behind the cause.
Yeah.
And I've always believed this, and I'm talking about since like I was a young girl, that America, Black America, is really waiting for that next leader to stand up. And I think that we've done a great job of having leaders in pockets. So I'm thinking about cities that have strong Black leadership, and that city has been able to transform through that Black leadership. But I'm thinking from a national perspective, we have not had a national leader to focus specifically on African Americans. So, and that was the deal. Like everybody thought President Obama was going to be that next leader. They compared him to Dr. King. He was going to be the next Dr. King, but the position he held, he had to focus on all Americans.
Right.
He could not just focus on African Americans because, and then the other part is like, as African Americans, even in the workplace, we have this expectation of what we can and cannot do. And there's this inferiority that exists, that there's this line you can't cross as an African American leader, because if you cross that line, you're too Black. Even we've talked about this, how you wear your hair. You can't wear your hair a certain way. As I was interviewing for my new position, we talked about like, oh, I can't have braids because having braids creates this stigma. And so I needed to come up with a hairstyle, and then once I got the job, then I got the braids. And so we are so convoluted with so many of those things that I think the bottom line is like, we're waiting for the next Dr. King, but there's not going to be another Dr. King.
No, because the truth be told, right, if we think about Dr. King, he didn't want to be the leader. He was just appointed by his peers to be the spokesperson and be the leader. And so he became the leader, but he didn't sign up for that. Neither did Rosa Parks. She didn't sign up to be the leader. She said she had personally had enough. And because of her struggle, because of her trauma, it led to the civil rights movement. And so I'm feeling like, when are we going to say one person has just had enough and they're willing to go the distance? Because I'll share this with you as we tie back to how we opened our show today. Dr. Scott asked me to recap on what happened with my son. Please know there were folks who were telling me I was doing too much, oh, that it wasn't that serious. And so I think for me, if it's happening to one person in the community, it could potentially happen to me. And so I feel like there's a point where we have to value someone else's struggle, right? Scott, we've talked about how people are like, how can you cry for someone that you don't know? Because there's the human side of us that has empathy and sympathy, and we're thinking about that could be me. And so how do we rally around one person's struggle and make it a movement? So you and I both have committed to making education our movement, but I'm moving, in service of John, Sydney, and David. And because I'm moving in service of them, guess what? Your kid will also be impacted. So for me, I'm like, instead of waiting for somebody to say, hey, somebody needs to tackle education, I'm like, no, let me be the one to tackle it on behalf of my 3, in the hopes that it will move and inspire someone else to move on behalf of their children, that will create now this domino effect and a legacy for others. Even choosing to become wealthy, I'm moving in service of my children. Matter of fact, becoming wealthy, I'm moving in service of my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, who will never know me, but their lives will forever be changed because I'm making a decision. And so I'll give you an example. It's just making me think about, and I sighed heavily because I'm thinking about the state of education right now, right? And, we're talking about politics and these moves, but you have a choice whether or not you want to send your kid back to school. And teachers, you also have a choice on whether or not you want to go back. But I'm wondering how many teachers are sitting back like, I'm not losing my retirement, or I'm not going to get involved because I'm not going to rock the boat. Mm-hmm. We have so many people who are like lukewarm revolutionaries, right? They're not really ready to rock the boat. And so we're not going to have change. If I hear one more person say, I got mine, you got to get yours, or that doesn't affect me, I'm going to scream, because it does affect us. If it affects one of us, it affects all of us. You and I yesterday had an opportunity to spend time with a really good friend of ours who just recently lost her husband. And even though you and I have never lost a spouse, there was a part of us that felt connected to it. We could. And so we rallied around that individual because that's what you do. So I'm looking for people to say, let's rally around whatever decision is made in the White House. But as communities or pods, let's start to pool our resources. Let's start to do things, again, in service of making our community better. Because every other race has done it. I have a book for y'all. If you're looking to change your mindset, you go read The Jewish Phenomenon, and you see how a community is willing to sacrifice their generation in order for the next generation to have what they didn't have. People of color, Black folks, I love us, but we're too busy like, I gotta have it now because I don't know if I'll have it later. I'm in such disagreement with that philosophy. Sometimes you gotta put off what you want now so that you can have more later.
Yeah, and I think I made it on my own, so the next generation will make it on their own. I grew up in an all Jewish community. Mm-hmm. So growing up, I had and went to school with many Jewish students. And I'm thinking about Heidi Dechter. Now, I have not seen Heidi Dechter in God knows an easy 30 years. Mm-hmm. But I admired Heidi Dechter. She had like 6 siblings. She lived around the corner from us. And one of the reasons why I admired Heidi Dechter, two things. She had a pool. And so it was always good to have a friend with a pool, right? But she had all these Cabbage Patch dolls. She had like 13 of them.
Oh, okay.
She was like deep in Cabbage Patch dolls, right? And so I wanted what Heidi Dechter had. Mm-hmm. And I could remember my parents saying, if you work hard, you'll get what Heidi Dechter has. And I was like, no, it's not about working hard. By the time I get old to work, I'm not going to want 13 Cabbage Patch dolls. Yeah. And my mom's like, well, by the time you get that age, you can have what you want to have. But I was taught to save. I was taught when people did really small things for me to send them handwritten thank you notes.
Yeah.
Like my parents really, if I wanted something that was expensive back then, Cabbage Patch dolls were pretty expensive, or at least for my family. And so, like, I can remember getting my first Cabbage Patch doll for Christmas, wanting one, like a second one, and having to write why getting a second Cabbage Patch doll was even necessary.
Yeah.
So my parents put like these perimeters on me that if I wanted things, I had to like, give them the reason why, like it was an essay. And we did this like from 5th grade all the way to high school. So I can even remember writing my last essay when I wanted my first Coach bag.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt like my parents were so mean because they pushed me to do things like that, where the Heidi Dectors of the world, right? And I'm using Heidi Dector, but I mean, clearly there was like Sandy Frasinski, and I mean, the list goes on and on, right? But it just seemed like I had to work so much harder. And I appreciate those values now, because now I also feel like I have to work so much harder. And to your point, the reason why people don't rock the boat is because for a Black person to lose their job, it's fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not willing to rock the boat. I'm not willing to say this is your famous line, I'll work at Walmart. Like the average Black person isn't willing to rock the boat to work at Walmart or even find another job. They stay in the hell because the hell is easier versus for them to look for another position. We know people right now who hate where they work, but because of their own insecurity, their own ability to try to find another job, they'd rather stay in hell.
And so to me, it seems like the work is way bigger than who's in the White House. The work is who's in your house, right? Your inner you, right? My mentor said, once you defeat the inner me, there's nothing the enemy can do for you, right? Because if we're looking for that one savior, that one person, that one thing, we're never going to find it, especially when we're not right on the inside. It's funny. We are coming up on, I don't know what anniversary it is, but Waiting for Superman is out on Netflix. And if you haven't had a chance to watch Waiting for Superman, it's a documentary on education, and it highlights the institution that Dr. Scott and I used to work with. But this idea of someone coming to save you, it never happens, because there's still so much work that you have to do in order to get to that promised land. So hence the movie is entitled Waiting for Superman. You're waiting for something to happen. If you want to get technical, waiting, ing, is the gerund form of the verb to wait, which means it's like this ever reoccurring, consistent thing, which means you can never attain it because it'll never happen.
Teach us this morning. Yes, teach, honey.
I'm just saying, right? It's just this idea, like this perpetual nothingness, right? You're waiting. That means you are in limbo, hoping someone else can define your life for you. And any successful person that I've personally met or been mentored by says, you've got to get out here and make it happen for yourself. You've got to be the one. Oprah Winfrey, from Bill Gates to Oprah Winfrey to the local entrepreneur in the community that's making a difference, they count on themselves. And I feel like that needs to be the push, instead of always waiting for someone else to be the answer. Because here's the deal, Scott, from where you sit in your position and where I sit, our priorities are totally different. You see the picture from a bird's eye view, right? And I see the picture right in the forest. And so your scope, when you speak to me about things, is from this big lens. And I'm looking just only at my forest. And so if I'm waiting for you to give me the answer on my forest, you can't, because you're thinking about all the trees in the forest. I only see my tree. And so that's the thing, like, figure out what's your tree and then go after that thing and find a community and a group of people that want to rally around that thing with you. And I guarantee, I know it, I've seen it. We've seen change happen on very, very grassroots levels that, magnify in ways we haven't seen, right? I'm thinking of every student that we've both impacted, who's gone to college, who's graduated, who's become extremely successful in whatever career they've chosen because it started with them. So, I'm like, what's going to happen November, right? The election day, November the 3rd. What's going to happen in America? What are people thinking? What are people doing? People are creating an energy. They're creating a story that isn't even here yet. Right? I'm not about to say, oh, I hope I don't get COVID. I'm not even going to speak that into my space. Right? I'm every day affirming I'm happy and I'm healthy. Right? And that all great things are coming toward me because I am the person that people want to do business with. I am that person, right? I'm affirming myself. I don't need either Biden or Trump to affirm that for me because they weren't there when I was born and they're not going to be there when I'm dead. And that may be a very radical response to this, but you're going to have people jumping out here, creating a narrative, scaring people more than people already are. And for what?
Yeah, that fear creates something that discourages people from voting.
It does. It's like it makes me think about slavery, right? As a whole. I didn't have to whip you. I could just make you believe you were already whipped. You were already defeated. And then what? You don't even attempt. You don't even try. And that for real is the mass weapon of destruction. It's fear.
For sure. Our time is up. We need 20 more minutes. Now, we look forward to you joining us again next Saturday as you do take a look with Dr. Quignon N. Scott and Mrs. Christina Cook. We are so delighted. We will encourage you again next Saturday, but remember, you have the ability to affirm who you will be, and it's truly up to you. You make a difference, and there are times where you just don't feel like you can make a difference. You connect with somebody who can be your Energizer bunny, and I promise you life will turn around on your behalf. With that said in mind, join us again next week as we are back. And we look forward